Like, subscribe, and hype the video. Also, leave a comment on any topics you want to hear about in the future. Okay, let's dive in. Right now, in orbit above your head, there are roughly 9,000 active satellites. Some of them deliver your GPS navigation, your weather forecasts, your internet connection, and your television signal. Some of them are scientific instruments studying the climate, the oceans, and the cosmos. And some of them, an unknown number, in classified orbits, operated by military programs that don't publish their capabilities, are doing things that governments have never publicly described in detail. Space has been militarized since the very beginning of the space age. The rockets that launched the first satellites were developed from intercontinental ballistic missiles. The earliest reconnaissance satellites were military programs so classified that their existence wasn't officially acknowledged for decades. And today, every major military power on Earth operates space assets that are considered critical national security infrastructure and is actively developing capabilities designed to threaten those of its adversaries. Today, we're walking through what is actually, documentably happening in the militarization of space, the real programs, the real treaties, and the real capabilities that have been confirmed or acknowledged. In our next episode, we're getting into the classified programs, the conspiracy theories about what's actually up there, and the weapons systems that governments are building right now that the public knows almost nothing about. Stick around for that one. The militarization of space didn't begin with some dramatic decision by a government to weaponize orbit. It began with the physics of rockets themselves, because the same trajectory that puts a payload into orbit is, with a different angle of departure, the trajectory of an intercontinental ballistic missile delivering a nuclear warhead to the other side of the planet. Wernher von Braun's team, which developed the V-2 rocket for Germany in World War II, was the same group of engineers that went to the United States after the war and laid the technical foundation for the American space program. Sergei Korolev, the chief designer of the Soviet space program who built Sputnik, was simultaneously designing the R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile. The space race and the nuclear arms race weren't separate competitions. They were the same competition, running on the same technology, with the same teams. The first operational military use of space came even before human spaceflight. In 1960, the United States launched the first Corona reconnaissance satellite, a classified program so secret that its very existence wasn't acknowledged publicly until 1995. Designed to photograph Soviet military installations from orbit and return the film to Earth in a capsule ejected from the satellite and caught mid-air by aircraft. These satellites provided intelligence that ground-based espionage couldn't match, and their successors have been operating continuously in increasingly sophisticated form ever since. Like, subscribe, and hype the video. And let's get into what the treaties actually say and don't say about weapons in space. The primary international legal framework governing weapons in space is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, signed by the United States, the Soviet Union, and over 100 other nations, which was negotiated at the height of the Cold War space race and represented a genuine attempt to prevent the most catastrophic possible weaponization of orbit. The treaty prohibits placing nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction in orbit, on the moon, or on any other celestial body. It declares outer space the province of all mankind and prohibits national appropriation of celestial bodies. These are genuine, meaningful restrictions that have been maintained by major powers for over 50 years. But the treaty's limits are equally important to understand. It does not prohibit conventional weapons in orbit, only weapons of mass destruction. It does not prohibit military satellites of any kind, including reconnaissance, communications, and early warning systems. It does not prohibit anti-satellite weapons, systems designed to destroy or disable other nations' satellites, as long as those weapons aren't themselves placed permanently in orbit. And it contains no enforcement mechanism beyond diplomatic pressure and the political cost of being seen to violate it. This means that everything short of orbital nuclear weapons is, technically, permitted under existing international law, and the major military powers have been extensively developing capabilities in exactly that space for decades. In November 2021, Russia destroyed one of its own defunct satellites using a ground-launched anti-satellite missile. The test produced over 1,500 trackable debris fragments in low Earth orbit, the same orbital band used by the International Space Station, forcing ISS crew members to shelter in their docked Soyuz and Dragon spacecraft as a precautionary measure while the debris cloud passed. The debris from that single test will remain a collision hazard for other satellites for years. Russia wasn't the first to conduct such a test. China destroyed one of its own weather satellites in 2007, creating the largest debris field in orbital history, over 3,000 trackable fragments that remain in orbit today. The United States conducted a similar test in 2008, destroying a malfunctioning spy satellite in a lower orbit, an orbit low enough that the debris would re-enter the atmosphere relatively quickly, rather than persisting for years. India conducted a successful anti-satellite test in 2019, becoming the fourth country to demonstrate the capability. These tests demonstrated something important. Multiple major military powers now possess the confirmed, demonstrated ability to destroy satellites in orbit using ground-launched missiles. Given that modern military operations are deeply dependent on satellite communications, GPS navigation, reconnaissance imagery, and missile early warning systems, the ability to destroy an adversary's satellites represents a significant military capability, one that every major power is now actively developing and refining, and that existing treaties do nothing to prohibit. Like, subscribe, and hype the video, and let's get into the capabilities that are harder to see. Beyond the dramatic visible tests of anti-satellite missiles, the major military powers have been developing and deploying a range of capabilities that occupy a legally and politically ambiguous space. Systems that can threaten or degrade adversary satellites without constituting an obvious, attributable attack. The United States, Russia, and China have all operated satellites that approach other nations' satellites at close range, sometimes extremely close range, in maneuvers that could serve either legitimate inspection or surveillance purposes, or could position a satellite to interfere with or disable another one if commanded to do so. Russia has operated satellites described by U.S. Space Command as exhibiting behaviors consistent with a space-based anti-satellite weapon, deploying sub-satellites and conducting unusual maneuvers near other nations' assets. Ground-based laser systems capable of temporarily blinding the optical sensors of reconnaissance satellites, called dazzling, have been developed and reportedly used by multiple nations. Signal jamming, disrupting GPS, communications, or other signals from satellites without physically damaging them, is an established military capability already used in conflict zones. Cyber intrusions targeting satellite control systems represent another avenue of attack that doesn't require any physical weapon at all. Each of these capabilities exists in a legal gray zone. The Outer Space Treaty and other agreements don't clearly address them. Attribution is difficult, and the threshold at which any of them constitutes an act of war sufficient to justify a military response has never been clearly defined by any major power. In December 2019, the United States established the Space Force as the sixth branch of the U.S. military, the first new military branch created since the Air Force was established in 1947. The creation of Space Force was widely mocked in popular culture and treated as a punchline, but the actual reasoning behind it reflects the genuine seriousness with which the U.S. military now treats the threat to its space-based assets. Space Force's official mission encompasses operating and defending U.S. military satellites, providing GPS services to military and civilian users, operating missile early warning systems, monitoring space for threats including debris and adversary satellites, and developing capabilities for military space operations. It is not, despite popular misconceptions, a combat force preparing to fight battles in orbit. It is primarily a service branch designed to protect and operate the space infrastructure that modern military operations depend on, and to develop the capability to degrade or deny adversary access to their space assets if required. The creation of a dedicated military space branch reflects a genuine strategic reality that satellites are now as critical to military operations as aircraft, ships, and ground forces, and that protecting them requires the same level of dedicated organizational focus that other military domains receive. So here's what's documentably, confirmably happening in the militarization of space right now. Anti-satellite missiles tested by 4 countries. Gray zone capabilities that can blind, jam, or cyber-attack satellites without firing a shot. A space legal framework that prohibits nuclear weapons but permits almost everything else. And a new U.S. military branch, specifically created to protect and operate space assets that modern warfare now depends on entirely. But this is only what's publicly acknowledged. In our next episode, we're getting into what isn't acknowledged, the classified programs that have been partially revealed through leaks and inadvertent disclosures. The conspiracy theories about exotic weapons systems in orbit that governments deny exist, and the real, documented programs that were kept secret for decades before being partially confirmed. Some of what's coming in the next episode is going to be harder to dismiss than you might expect. Stick around for that one. Like, subscribe, and hype the video so you don't miss part 2. And let me know in the comments how concerned you are about the militarization of space. I'll see you in the next one.